The Knowledge Valorisation platform connects players in Europe with ambition.
Hello there! Do you also find that the research results are slow to reach the market? Should benefit citizens better? Should we turn into more solutions to tackle climate change and other challenges? The EU Knowledge Valorisation platform is there to change that. Have a look and exchange with like-minded people across Europe to make it happen. Share your best example of a valorization practice and get visibility. Be inspired by what others are doing. Join a community to tackle specific issues. Find advice and guidelines. Take part in workshops and events like the EU Knowledge Valorisation Week. Keep up with latest developments and background studies. There is much for you to discover on the EU Knowledge Valorisation platform. Join us!
Welcome to the third day of the third EU Knowledge Valorization Week. Today is dedicated to industry science cooperation, and we start with the Knowledge Valorization talk on standardization. Standardization is, of course, all about valorization and uptake of research and innovation results. I'm delighted to do this Knowledge Valorization talk together with Maive Rüthe. Maive is the Deputy Director General for our department in the EU for industry, for internal market, entrepreneurship, and small and medium-sized enterprises. And Maive oversees the industrial green transition, the resilience of supply chains, the promotion of investment, and intellectual property rights. And there is standardization all through these areas or in your mandate. And no surprise that Maive has been nominated the first ever EU Chief Standardization Officer. Welcome, Maive.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
And I'm equally delighted to welcome Kurt Nielsen. Kurt is the Technology Director at the Danish Technological Institute. Kurt has a tremendous experience when it comes to robotics and automation. And he has been a driving force in quite a number of breakthrough projects, also funded by us, and he knows really well what works in standardization and what not. Kurt, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Wonderful. So we'll start with a keynote from Maive, but before that, let me briefly explain how we're going to do it. Keynote from Maive, a short introduction from me as regards this code of practice on standardization. Then we'll have a video message from Stefano Calzonari. He's the president of the European Committee for Standardization, better known as CEN. And after the interview I exchanged with Kurt, we'll have a video message from Markus Mueck. He's the chair of the strategic group of the European Telecommunication Standardization Institute, better known as ETSI. Ready to go? Maive, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. So let me say that I find it very timely, first of all, because we all understand that Europe needs to be reflecting about our long-term competitiveness, and Commission has been recently very much in this mode of looking into what our long-term competitiveness depends on. And there, exactly this Knowledge Valorization Week comes very timely because, of course, our long-term competitiveness depends directly on our knowledge, our know-how, innovation, and then how do we turn it into the new products, services that will be underpinning our long-term competitiveness. So I find it very timely to be speaking today here, indeed, in my double capacity as the Deputy Director General for DG RU, which stands for Industry, SMEs and Single Market, as Peter has already explained, and then also being the Chief Standardization Officer. And I'm very happy to be today here also because we have today a special day. We are waiting for an important package on patents. So today, Commission is very likely to adopt and announce I think at 11 or so there will be a press conference even. The patent package, which also has important elements for standards. So we're gonna see things being put forward on supplementary protection certificates, compulsory licensing, and of course the standard essential patents as well. And this is a year when finally, after all these years, unitary patent is about to come forward in June. So as a Commission, we are taking things forward in the intellectual property rights elements and very much working also, of course, on standardization. And standardization is a strategy that we have renewed about a year ago. And certainly, one of the elements that in this strategy is very much underlined is how do we really get this pre-normative elements, pre-normative research, pre-normative standard development going. And that's where, of course, research and the many people in the audience here, I believe, would come in. And we are interested in, of course, using standards to get the innovative products to the market, but similarly, and very much so, we are interested in having people with all this expert knowledge to participate in our standards development so that the newest technologies would also come forward from European research. Let me just give you maybe one concrete example of how we have done it recently. You have certainly heard that Europe is currently investing quite a lot of effort and also funds into hydrogen. More than 2 years ago, we launched the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which comprises of more than 650 organizations from industry, but also public authorities, civil society, research organizations, and they are coming together to create new value chains for hydrogen production and hydrogen use. And one of the very first things that came from the Alliance reflections was that standards are needed. So we have been very happy to work with the Alliance members so that now there is a collective, I would say, kind of a mandate put together to develop indeed the standards needed for this new hydrogen production, deployment, electrolyzers, and so on and so forth. So in this area, indeed, standards was one of the very, very first things that the participants in the Hydrogen Alliance have put forward. But similarly also in the other fields. And as Peter has said, one of my responsibilities in DG GROW is to supervise, oversee, be part of the decarbonization of our industries and make sure that we go forward really the transition towards green and digitalized industries. And there, standards are really, really everywhere, and more work is needed. And with this in mind, I'm very happy that today we have the opportunity to learn about two initiatives. I mean, the standardization booster, which helps those participating in research and development innovation projects to valorize their results through standardization. So that's one, standardization booster. And today we will hear indeed about code of practice, which will be, I believe, really a good tool, helpful for many of you. And let me finish with 3 wishes. So my 3 wishes. First, particularly to the researchers in the auditorium here, the virtual auditorium, when you are working on this groundbreaking new technologies, please think of standardization as well as an element to be looked at, to be part of your projects. So let's make sure that when we have great innovations, standardization would be an element that you are reflecting upon. Second plea is that for those of you, including Peter, but of course also others who are coming from research funding side, let's make sure that we have standardization covered as an element in the funding of the research projects and innovation projects, so that it wouldn't be kind of a narrow approach, but something that indeed would be supported by a broad base. And this certainly will help us to keep European competitiveness in the future and help build it further. And finally, my third plea is particularly to people who are from the universities. We need more students to take up studies where they would understand how standard setting is actually done. We need people in the universities to develop curricula around standardization so that the already rather, I would say, aging population of our standard developers would be renewed, and we would get more people into standard setting, standardization process in Europe as well as internationally. So with these three wishes, I give it back to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maiva. Your wishes are our command. I can say for the European level that indeed when we fund R&I projects, standardization is a possible element which we would reimburse. It's part of the impact we want to achieve, and so the dissemination, exploitation, value creation, part of our projects. And your wishes are, I think, also reflected in this code of standardization. And I have the pleasure now to briefly present it here. So it is, of course, deeply embedded in the standardization strategy mentioned by Maive, actually triggered by that, and our guiding principles more generally, the guiding principles on knowledge valorization. And the way we've done it, we've looked at all the research and innovation projects in Horizon in the EU Research and Innovation Program, which had a potential for standardization and how they did it. And we found something very interesting. There's a high interest to use standards, but there's only a small fraction of projects who actually do it. So how that? How come? And that's what the code of practice is addressing. And it's very inclusive, actually. It's not only at the late stages of a project, and that is also what you mentioned, Maive, from the early on. You can have a relevance for standardization at the early stage, at low technology readiness levels. This would be about terminologies, concepts, also testing methods, very precision testing, so important also for the green transition Maive mentioned. So it's inclusive, it's not just at the end of the project. And then this code comes with a set of recommendations and success factors to overcome this valley of death, that there is relevance, but it's not happening in practice. And it's the recommendations are addressed to institutions, to project partners, and to policymakers, actually, and public administration. So at institutional level, the code recommends to develop a standardization policy. And that would then very much include also skills development mentioned by Maive, to integrate standardization in career plans, yeah, and to provide for education and training on standardization. So it's really that which came out of our analysis and the co-creation we have done with stakeholders for this code of practice. At project partners level, so if you were together in a collaborative project, the code gives guidance on how project partners can best involve standardization bodies. Very important for the uptake and for the success. And how to bridge the problem of the lengthy standard setting process, which there is no synchronization between the project lifecycle and the standardization lifecycle, which is in our European model consensus-based. That's a treasure, a value, but we have a timing issue. So the code addresses also that. And finally, as regards policy and stakeholders, so policymakers, the code refers to the collaboration with standard development organizations, with higher education institutions, with research and innovation institutions, technology performing organizations, and how to use national funding structures to support standardization in valorizing research results. So it's inclusive, comprehensive, very operational, and we hope with that we will have a major increase in the use of standardization as one of the important tools for knowledge valorization, and for the Industry Science Corporation, we are dedicating today, this day of our Knowledge Valorisation Week. So the implementation is just ahead of us. Let's go. We do an awareness raising campaign and standardization will be there. Maive mentioned the standardization booster, a fantastic project. If you, wherever you are in the project lifecycle and you have the impression I could do something with standardization, reach out to the standardization booster. And later this year in October, at the occasion of the World Standardization Day, we will launch a survey where you, the companies, business, enterprises can tell us what matters most for you in terms of standardization. And in the standardization strategy mentioned by Maive, there is something beautiful that DG GROW, the Commission, would have a stronger influence in setting the priorities for standardization organizations. So we have a possibility to take up the priorities coming up from industry. So now it's time for a message from Stefano Calzolari. Stefano is the president of the European Committee for Standardization. Stefano, please.
Hello, my name is Stefano Calzolari. I am the president of SEN and Innovation Champion for both SEN and SENELEC, two of the three officially recognized European standardization organizations. I would like to congratulate the European Commission on adopting the Code of Practice on the Standardization. This code recognizes the value of standards as a tool to valorize new knowledge. Thanks to the hard work over the last years by the many actors involved, this initiative will strengthen the understanding of the benefits of standards for research outcomes and help raise the visibility of standardization in the EU research and innovation landscape. Indeed, the code is the result of a co-creation process among all relevant stakeholders. We have been happy to contribute to the process and are now committed to its promotion. In particular, I am very pleased that several research projects nominated to SEN and SENELEC's annual Standards Plus Innovation Awards were identified as good practices in the scoping study that inspired the Code of Practice. We also take note of the Code's recommendations, which encourage SEN and SENELEC and our national members to extend our outreach to higher education institutions and research innovation organizations, identify opportunities to make standardization processes more flexible and easier to synchronize with research innovation activities, assess how authorship and contribution to standards creation can be better tracked, and offer trainings and awareness-raising activities to researchers and innovators. This is fully aligned with our own priorities. In particular, through Goal 4 of our Strategy 2030, we aim to encourage the use of European standards to enhance the impact of research and innovation projects on the global market. As part of this goal, we want to make sure our system is welcoming researchers and recognizes their contribution. In particular, we want to invest in the education of researchers, innovators, and students to attract a future generation of standard makers. As SEN and SENELEC, we look forward to working with the Commission to promote the Code of Practice together. We can help European researchers leverage the power of standardization to generate lasting value.
Thank you so much. It's so important. It's a treasure to have the support and this cooperation, your commitment, Stefano, that we do it together. And I think that's also a big encouragement for every researcher in whatever project, that there is this link, this open door to the European Standardization Organization. So that's really an important message of today. Thank you so much. Now it's time to zoom in. Kurt, for us, you are the best practice. Let's zoom into your experience. So you are among many things, you are the coordinator of a specific project, COVER. And I understand through the project you have created a one-stop shop for safety for collaborative robots. Big trend, collaborative robots. And so my first question to you is, what are the difficulties you face in terms of market uptake? And could eventually this code of practice help in that respect? Could.
Yes, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a bit about this. Yeah, you're completely right. So we had the cover project really working on how can we remove some of the barrier from a faster uptake of robotics in new domains, which is in many places still limited by the lack of standards, especially within safety. So that's really what we worked on and tried to find out how can we do that together with the industry. And I think the collaboration between academia, research institutes, and industry is really important in this, like in many other aspects on technology as well. That we really need to make sure that this is adopted. And the only way we can do that is that we do that in a joint effort. So what we did in the cover project was really also based on that we took very specific needs in very specific domains on very specific technologies and try to find really how to solve and remove some of these barriers through standards. And sometimes new standards were needed, and sometimes existing could be adopted, and sometimes we just need to have a guideline how to really use the existing ones. So that was really the key in the work we did.
From your experience, you said it needs to be very specific, Kurt. Is that within a project or is it more general? To make this link between the specificity of, in that case, human-machine interaction, collaboration, is that in that field to have one standard, or are you looking at different standards here? What is the problem?
So the issue is really that when we're moving into these new domains, it's the existing standards might not be sufficient because the technology is maybe moving faster than the standards is by itself. And that means that when we have new, for example, robots that we want to take outdoor, then there is not really a good existing standard in place. So we need to find out how to remove that barrier, because if the technology works, that is not enough. We still need to make sure that it can also be adopted by standards and regulations. So it's not really one standard, it's really a number of standards, but of course they can be inspired by each other and they can have some of the same fundamentals inside, for example, towards safety. But I think the important thing here is really that it needs to go hand in hand. What can the technology do and what can standards do? So does this barrier, do they need to be removed by technology or by standards or a combination? And often it's the latter part.
I understand. Very good. You heard the president of CEN, their support, and my best wishes, also looking into the future generation of researchers. How do you see, with your experience in a very dynamic field, the future relation between research and standardization bodies? That's a very general question.
Yeah, but I'm really happy to hear what you're doing here under this initiative. I think it's really what is needed at this point. And I completely agree that there's a number of barriers that you also really nicely identified, I think, and addressed in the code of practice. So there's all this issue in general. How do you really go from that you have a timeline in research project, which might be different from a timeline in the commercial market? And the critical part is really to address this, going from something that you do in a project to something that you do in a product and doing in a real market. So I really embrace that we need something to support that, and we need to make sure that this chain is not broken at some point, so that we have this instrument, as you proposed today as well, that we can really go from a project is not ending, but we keep working on it from both sides, because this handover from research industry to industry is really important. And this might not end out in a 4-year project. There might be a lot of work really have to take place afterwards as well. So having a really strong incentive for research to continue to work and making sure that this is really finding all the way to adoption is really important.
That might be a big bottleneck. Any reaction from the EU Chief Standardization Officer?
I will first say that I like very much the few points that Kurt has made. Often we don't even know what already exists. And maybe with the researchers, it's less of a matter, but we have seen very much that with many SMEs out there, they may not even know what standards are already there or they may have difficulties to access these standards that already exist. But then, of course, for researchers, very much I support the thinking that the standardization, let's say, thinking should be there already in the early stage of when setting up the project, so that also when we go through the research, let's say this intellectual journey, we would be thinking how can one also then already facilitate the take-up of these future innovations, technologies. So what elements might need standardization in order to reach market, and maybe what not, because not everything needs to be standardized necessarily. So for researchers, I find this message very strong, that it shouldn't stop when the research funding stops. There needs to be a bridge built towards actual implementation. And we've, of course, also heard from Senelec that there is a willingness to provide more training, more support, so that indeed this would be a more seamless process. So very good messages so far.
Mm-hmm. Kurt, can I come back to that? In your experience, when the project funding ends, what are the possibilities to continue with standardization? What would be a best practice here where we can take inspiration from?
So what we normally try to do, being an RTO at DTI, is really that we make sure that this is somehow auto-collaborated or embedded into our existing business, you could say. Because, of course, everyone needs to make this into a business in the end, both from the company side and from the research side. So it's really also that we turn this into, for example, consultancy on helping companies going forward with this in the future. So really having this pathway to impact, but also to exploitation, I think is really important to address that as well. Because as you were mentioning as well, it's not just about making the standard and the document. We also need to make it alive. So I think that's really important that we have this afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm. I see Maiva nodding.
Yeah.
It's not just a standard, it's making it alive.
Absolutely, making it actually useful.
Yeah.
Nobody is happy if we just have a big pile of papers and they are not utilized by the market participants. So very much so, making it alive.
Very good. Let's move to Markus Mueck. He is the chair of the strategy group of ETSI. And I'm very grateful also for ETSI's very strong support in presenting and drafting the code of practice. Markus, floor is yours.
My name is Markus Mueck. I'm vice chair of the ETSI board and chair of the Research, Innovation and Standardization Ecosystem Strategy Group of the ETSI board. And in this context, we're really driving interactions between the research and innovation community, increasing the links between projects and standardization. ETSI has been actively working towards facilitating the exploitation of research work, and we truly believe that standardization is a brilliant way for taking technology innovation towards market exploitation and taking it basically to the benefit of European society. We congratulate the European Commission for its recommendation on the Code of Practice on Standardization in the European research area, and ETSI is actually already implementing several of the recommendations of the code. I can also inform you that in the past we have been actively reaching out to the research community through a questionnaire, and we have been receiving feedback on the roadblocks that are currently being seen by this community. In particular, some of the metrics that are being used in the research community are not directly met by the standardization ecosystem, such as counting the number of publications. And we are excited that exactly these items are being addressed by the code. So ETSI is very much looking forward to further collaborating with the Commission and making the transfer of technology towards standardization, leading to exploitation, a really true success story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Markus. I'm really encouraged by the strong support from ETSI, from SEN, in implementing this code and taking us to the next level as regards the use of standardization. Markus mentioned an important point about how we value the quality and performance of researchers. And there is also, not only in the code, but we have this agreement of institution, a coalition on principles for new metrics to measure performance of science. And there is also quite an importance given to the field of exploitation and standardization. So we have something to build on, and I didn't hear that much criticism about the code. I'm sure we can also do better, but now it's time to implement. But perhaps for the closing statements, I will first turn to you, Kurt. Please point us also to what Maive called wishes, what we need to do next and to do it better.
But I think this work is really important to get started. And one thing is that standard can open up new markets. Standards or lack of standards can also close down markets. So I think this is really important that you have persistency in putting this out, and also understanding, I think, that it's probably in for the long term, right? This is not something we can fix within a few months. This is really also really making it a new culture, maybe at some research institute, that this is really important and that we need to have this included. You also mentioned that it's probably also about going to the universities and making it more embedded in what the students are learning. So I think this is really a long-term effort, but it's really important.
Thank you very much. And that resonates very well with the first statement from Maive, long-term competitiveness. Maive.
Yes, well, from my side, I will repeat again this point that we have to really broaden the basis of European standardization. We are currently in a situation that we have, of course, very well-valued experts, but a number of them are really getting already at the age where they are ready to retire. We need more people who understand standards. We need a broader base. We need people in the university age to choose it as something where they want to invest and have the technical capacity of doing so. So that for me is really a big, I would say, strategic challenge, if you wish. I see the research community as a great supporter in this job. And also then the research community would tackle our second challenge, namely to be there where the technology is really groundbreaking, where we are really going to the edge of novel technologies. And that's where the researchers can really make a big difference. And that is where, of course, also the European standard setting should be then more, should I say, kind of more really active and making sure that the standards are not coming only from the other areas globally, which are our competitors, our friends sometimes, but let's make sure that Europe also has our feet very strongly on the ground in the standard making. And then my third point is about SMEs and the availability of standards and making sure that indeed there is this continuity of not only writing standards, but getting them also adopted. And that is again an area where training, awareness raising, and working between research, academia, industry would actually help a lot.
Thank you both very much. I thought this was very insightful, very interesting, and very encouraging. There is an open door on the side of the European standardization organizations, on the side of the policymakers who make industry policy, and this broad base Maive was referring to is something where the research community can contribute. It's time to conclude, but please stay tuned for our next webinar. It has the inspiring title, Soulmates in Innovation, Business Science Cooperation in Regions. So that starts in 15 minutes from now. Thank you for being here. Thank you all.
Thank you, Peter, for moderation.
Thank you.
Well done.